All right, here we go. I'm going to start from the top.
Here you are. Yes, welcome.
Here we go. Sorry, everybody. Melissa McCready here, president of the Growth Operations Community, formerly called MOCA. Thank you guys all for coming today. Very excited to do this. We have a little bit of a different format than we expected, but with change comes change. So we're here to talk about the value of growth operations today. And people have asked, why growth operations? How is that different than revenue operations? And it really has to do with the customer. The customer is first. So when we talk about growth operations, we're talking about sales and marketing and customer success and product and channel, all of these things well orchestrated together so that we can help companies grow, but also our customers grow with us. So it's really a partnership mentality coming into this. Whereas revenue operations is really focused on revenue. So to me, revenue is the result of growth, and growth is really at the forefront. So it's a little bit of a different term, and we're hoping that this makes sense to everybody, and we would love your feedback after this event. And during this event, we're going to have some fantastic speakers coming up. Before we do that, I just want to talk about MOCA and why we made this change. So MOCA was a launching pad for us. MOCA was a fabulous organization with wonderful volunteers that carry the torch to where we are today. And so the focus there was on marketing operations. And we said, well, you can't really do marketing operations unless you're aligned with your constituents from these other areas. So here we are. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll go and take a look at our agenda today and talk about our wonderful speakers. So first up, we will have Heidi Bullock. She is the CMO of Tealium. She's also the former CMO at Engagio, and she was the VP of Marketing at Marketo. She's fantastic, so she's going to talk about what it is with growth operations and why it matters. Following her, we have Kate Federhar. She is the Director of Marketing Operations at CenturyLink. She is a Marketo Fearless 50 member, and she's the OpsStars Tech Pioneer of the Year. Fantastic. And then our closing keynote today will be Chris Yee. He is the author of Blitzscaling, which he will be talking about what is going on in the next 12 months with growth. And his book is available on Amazon, on audio as well. So please join us in welcoming our first speaker, Heidi Bullock. Give us just a moment. We are clearly having some technical difficulties here this morning. Seems like we have a theme with this.
Hi, my name is Heidi Bullock and I'm the CMO at Tealium. Welcome to today's Growth Ops event. We're very excited that you chose to spend your valuable time with us. Today, I'm going to be talking a bit about Growth Ops and how it's a very effective way to structure your teams so ultimately you can drive scalable and efficient growth, which is something that all of us want. So I thought I'd start the presentation with a little overview of 2020 thus far. And I think for many of us, whether you're in B2B, you're in B2C, you have different sizes of companies or in different industries, it's definitely been an interesting year to date. And I think a lot of us have felt that it is unprecedented. I promise I won't use that term anymore throughout this presentation. But what do we mean by that? A lot of us, I think in marketing, might have our same goals that we need to hit as far as pipeline, opportunities, close one revenue, renewals, but yet in a lot of cases, we might not necessarily have the same resources to hit those goals, and that makes it very challenging. And I think a lot of us, growth is really important. That's ultimately, I think, the objective of marketing is to have a great and dynamic brand and fuel growth, but it is feeling pretty hard. And while we all want, that end result, like I said, of pipeline and opportunities, I want to highlight this. It really depends on our inner structure and how we have things organized. And I think not enough emphasis is placed on this. I think it's easy to say, we want a lot of pipeline. Let's do account-based marketing, or let's do inbound marketing, or both. But really, a lot of organizations, they don't necessarily think about the internal structure and how important that is. Another thing that I want to highlight in this presentation is growth is, to me, a real mix of the entire customer journey and life cycle. So good growth depends on customer acquisition. We all get that. But it also really depends on, making sure your retention is strong and that you have great customer expansion strategies. And so the point that I'm making here is, when we talk about growth, it's not just acquisition. For it to be successful, it's really that complete and full funnel, which is very important. But the reason I highlight that is because that requires operational efficiency. You almost can think of a house and the house that we all live in, but for that house to be functional and a place that you want to stay, which we all are doing right now, working from home, you need to have great plumbing. Your stove needs to work. Everything needs to be working effectively together, the heating, the cooling. And that's really where I think revenue teams, that's the point of this presentation today. To have that successful growth throughout the funnel and the life cycle, we need to be making sure that we have a single source of truth for our customer data. We need great processes that are across the revenue team and really good communication. So that's really kind of what makes this all work. And I think, again, one of the highlights is we need to make sure that we're creating these great customer experiences more so now than I would say ever before, because not only are customers picky, they expect a lot. There's tons of data that will illustrate this point. But I think in the times that we're in right now with COVID, I think, customers are looking at solutions and tools that they can trust, they feel secure with. And so as organizations, we need to be able to deliver better experiences, or even if you could say, hey, that may not even be my problem, you certainly want to make sure you're spending your money in an efficient way, right? So that's key. And so all of these things really require us to see the complete picture. So you may say, interesting, she's talking about growth ops. This is a growth ops event. That's because we're using that term because it's not just the internal workings. Yes, it is. But it's those internal teams that make these revenue processes work with the kind of the vision and the understanding that the customer is at the center of this. So you need to have that customer-centric viewpoint to make this all work. And that's why we're calling it growth ops, which is very important. So with that, let's get into this in a little bit more detail, right? So as we said, maybe growth on food, not so good, but growth ops, yes, that is something that we all want. And to define it more formally, growth ops is customer-focused operations orchestration between the revenue teams, right? So sales, marketing, customer success. And the image that I have here is the life cycle of a chicken, but we can just, that's for fun. It's clearly we want to think about the life cycle of our customers, but to me, growth ops is what glues this all together. And this little schematic would not be in existence and it would not work if we didn't have that great glue. So that's really, really important. And I want to emphasize this because I see a lot of organizations that are all about let's drive growth, let's throw money at things, but then again, their internal structures and how their teams and how their data is organized is not great. So it's really important. So I just stress that it's important. So why does this matter so much? So in the absence of setting up your teams in a more uniform way, you have siloed teams. And so what do you get when you have marketing ops over here, sales ops over here, and customer success ops over here? I've seen this before, I've lived it. You have no single source of truth. So you have incomplete, often incomplete data. And in some cases, it's actually inaccurate, which is not good. You go to QBR, you go to any sort of meeting, and it's like sales is saying, well, this is the revenue data I have, and somebody else is saying, that those retention numbers don't match what I'm seeing. So you don't want that. It's a lot. To me, it's a big time waste. And this point goes without saying, you have an incomplete view of your customer life cycle when groups are siloed like that. Why? Because you're not looking at and collecting the same data. This also leads to, I think, poor forecasting, which is very, very important for business in general, but specifically, I would say right now, even more so. I highlighted this when you have your teams and data in silos, it's just inefficient because in my experience, what I've seen is mistakes are made, you end up replicating things. Like, I feel like everyone has seen that customer lifecycle chart, but each of these teams has their own version, which is not, that doesn't make any sense. That's just weird. And then clearly there's areas that we could be optimizing, but we're not because we're all looking at a different version of the truth. So that is not good. And enter growth ops, what is great is there's a shared truth of business. The teams have full funnel accountability or life cycle accountability. With better data, we can make predictable forecasts. You can optimize processes. You can really start to hone in on where your business can be improved, right? Maybe it is the stage from MQL to meeting. Maybe it's meeting to op. Maybe you have some retention issues. So that's really important. And I'd say, with more complete data, the nice thing is there's better efficiencies among teams. And I just think that if you have been a member of any ops team, this stuff can get pretty frustrating. There's nothing worse than pulling data and people arguing over what's right or saying, this isn't the report that we want to use or this field isn't up to date. It's just, you don't need to do that. And of course, ideally, with all this, when you have better data and more synergy with teams, you do see faster sales cycles and higher win rates. It's not magic. It's just making the process more efficient. So, where do people kind of fall down on this? And I really have just a few key areas, and this will make tons of sense. Like, first off, people silos. So when you have a VP of marketing, VP of sales, and customer success, and they all have their own ops teams, I just find that I don't think this works really well. And I have some different areas that these teams work on. But the first part is that is very obvious. Each of these folks will have their own set of goals. And so they're going to want their ops teams working on what they find important. But that may not be what is the most important for the entire revenue team. So I think when you have a growth ops org and you have a rev ops leader, often this group will report into your CRO. They have one goal, and that way there's just a lot more clarity and people are working on the right priorities. And again, like the data and the systems, they're just a lot more streamlined and shared, which is important. So the second issue that can come up is process complexity. When you have silos, you introduce a lot of weird complexity that doesn't need to be there, which is obvious, right? You have groups collecting data maybe differently. Maybe it's not complete. You might have somebody looking at retention, but then they might not be looking at in-app metrics, which is pretty hard to do if you don't have in-app metrics as an example, right? You might have data that's stored in a data lake. If you're not using that and you don't have a sense of what people are doing, how's that retention program going to be great? How can a marketer do a good job there? That's not good. Tech, in a lot of cases, there can be a lot of overlap and a lot of tools that are somewhat doing the same thing and maybe some inefficiencies there. And I already highlighted just the lack of kind of an organized and one set of priorities, which is very important. When you have different leaders and different teams, they're just it's not likely they're going to have all shared priorities. And then lastly, I think what you see when things are in silos is what I call crazy stack. I'm sure no one here has this problem, but it's really where, people buy tools and they don't talk to each other. And it's like, if you actually step back and you're like, wow, our SDR, organization's using this and marketing's using something similar and our success team, like they're using this, like, it's just, that is not a good thing. And it's from a holistic view, it's not cost effective for the business. It wastes lots of time and it's not ideal. And I will say the minute one of those folks leaves the business, people that are not aware of the tool, and then you just have all this technology that no one's using. So those are not good things. And I will also highlight, while we're on technology, this is what's really important about growth ops. When you don't have it organized to be really one cohesive team, again, people are using these different technologies and they all have a benefit, but they all have their own kind of system of record and view of the customer, right? So you can see, here's a woman, she's not happy. She's not having a good customer experience because, again, all of the data is stored in these different tools. And poor data, everyone knows this, is a poor experience. And there's different types of poor data that we can talk about. There's incomplete, lack of data, duplicate data. I think there's data that's sometimes outright incorrect, right? But when it's incomplete specifically, I'm just using a very simple example here for personalization. Poorly targeted ads, that's not good, right? Bad lookalike modeling that can result in offers you're sending to someone that make no sense. Maybe somebody bought a product and you're sending them an offer and they're just like, I just bought that product. That's not good. This is an important one right now for a lot of us who are trying to make our budgets go further. You really need good customer data because you want to be able to suppress different groups of folks from ads or experiences. And then ultimately, this is one we can all relate to. If you don't have a single view of your customer, you can have that incorrect contact frequency. So you don't have a sense of, wow, this person's been with our company for 7 years. We may not need to send them an email at the same frequency as somebody that we're trying to engage early on in the buyer's journey, right? And poor data, everyone on this has seen where things are not right and you can get a poor experience. And I think this is something that many of you know, and you could say, wow, I'm pretty much in operations. I've got my head down, but I don't want you to be today. I want you to really think about this. We're all customers, we're all buyers. It doesn't matter if you're in B2B or B2C. All of us have high standards. And I think we can definitely, thank Amazon and a lot of the great companies out there for that. Our expectations are high. And to me, customer experience is really going to be the key differentiator. I think it already is. This is data actually from Salesforce, but at some point products can seem somewhat the same, and there'll be little features and benefits that kind of go up and down. But if somebody's like, I like the experience this company gives me, their emails make sense, they're at the right cadence, they know I'm a customer, so when I go to the website, I get the right message. That matters. And it all ties back to having great data, but a great unified team with growth ops that can help deliver that. So yes, growth ops is the team to do this. So we want to think about getting rid of data in people's silos. This, I think, more so now than ever, I think all of us are considering building modern revenue organizations. And you see these companies, I see this all the time. They have all the best tools. They have people that read all the right things on LinkedIn and articles, but yet they haven't structured teams and thought about this piece that is so critical. We need to have a single view of our customers, and I'll get into some ways to do that in a minute. And then, of course, with the right data, and when I say right, I mean complete, accurate. We want to make sure that we're creating those relevant and good moments for buyers, whether they're a potential buyer or somebody that's been with our company for years. So you need the right data strategy to deliver the right experience. And that's what I'm showing here, where you have that unified view of your customer, which is so important. And we know when you do this and you have a good growth ops team, this is data. If you don't believe me, this is from Serious Decisions. Organizations typically see about 20% faster growth. Yes, I'm in marketing, I bumped that up a little, and 15% more profits. And I think all this is, you can argue the numbers, but when you're improving efficiencies and you're just being more thoughtful across teams, yes, you're not going to be duplicating and replicating things all the time and arguing over, again, fields and different data sources. We don't want to do that. So to make this work, what are some considerations? And here's a few, brief points that I've seen in my time in doing this. And so here are a few key things that matter. Again, I hope you take away one or two of these today. The first one is, ideally, if you have a growth ops team, they report into one person, shared objectives and goals. If people have different goals and objectives, guess what? They're going to focus on what their manager's asking them to do. 1, 2, the same incentives. That's another one, right? It's people will operate how you incentivize them. And this is a known thing, but yet many people don't do it. You cannot expect a particular behavior and have a different objective or goal and a different incentive. It's just hot mess, not going to happen. And I'd also say a shared language. I think it's very important. This is simple stuff, but again, I think a lot of people don't do it. Document your life cycle model or whatever that process is that your team follows. And for different companies, it'll look different. But do we all know what a meeting is? What's that definition? Do we all agree on what an opportunity is? Is there a stage 0 op or a stage 1 op? Is that defined? Is that, on the wall where everyone can see it, or is it in somebody's Google Drive that no one's looked at? That's really important. These are the things I think that matter. So now let's get into some specifics. And the first one is define and communicate your vision. I think with growth ops, you need to set goals and metrics. The people internally that are your customers, they need to get the why, right? So there's going to be executives that need certain types of data. They need to get why certain things are being done. You need to socialize how internal customers should get requests processed and addressed. So when you have a growth ops team, you still need to be clear on roles, because it's like, oh, I have a Salesforce issue, or this thing's wrong in Marketo. It needs to be clear who's going to whom for what thing, which is kind of that next point. So there's a white space we need to build out, because that's it, who is doing that. I need a custom report. Again, we need to communicate to revenue teams specifically who they should contact for these tasks. So that's important, because I think if you don't do that, it can get complicated. And then document the processes. So again, you have new people join, people leave the business. We want things documented. 2, focus on the customer. I don't need to belabor this point. I think this is something a lot of us say we know is true, but make sure that you have a way of actually doing this, right? And to me, I think it's very important to think about how you're collecting the right data and making sure that it's accurate, up to date. That leads to this point, which is making sure that in growth ops, have the right data strategy. It's really interesting. I think really good organizations take this very seriously. They think about, here I can walk through this really easily, like, where are my data sources coming from? My mobile, my web data, e-commerce data, CRM. How am I bringing this all in? So how am I collecting data? That matters. And a lot of us have tag management strategies to do that. A lot of people are really moving towards customer data platforms to get this singular view of a customer. So then all of that data can be brought in one place. You can create audiences and segments, and then bring it back out through the different apps for personalization on your website, etc. Now, one thing that's really, really important about this that I could belabor forever, but is all the compliance that's now we're seeing, right? So, even though we're in working from home and many of us are quarantined, CCPA can't stop, won't stop. And we want to be ready and make sure that for our customers, if you're, fall into that category, we can create really good experiences that follow, some of these kind of privacy preferences. So that is the right data strategy. Get this right. And even if you, are not like, oh, I didn't do it perfect, or I'm at a larger org that's, acquired companies, the point is have some semblance of what you want things to look like and then move in that direction, because I by no means want to say anyone has a perfect stack. No one does. So clear ownerships and handoffs. This is kind of the earlier point when you're bringing groups, kind of customer success, kind of customer ops, sales ops and marketing ops under one roof for growth ops. Just be clear around which individuals are doing what, and that, it's clear, this person owns our marketing automation system. This person owns our CRM. This person owns, Gainsight as an example. So I just think that's important to clarify. You want to structure your team by function. So often people ask, like, how do I think about growth ops? And this is just this is one way to do it. One example, yours could look different. But I find that if you think about the insights that are needed, so that might be a report for the board, or, hey, we're trying to understand our churn more, or, where are our upsell opportunities? You have your insights group. Then you have your ops group. A lot of that's pretty self-explanatory. Many of you are on this today: sales ops, marketing ops, customer ops, tools. So if there are people that, or maybe that can be sometimes ops and tools could sometimes be the same. In some larger companies, that's broken out. And then enablement can also fall under the same group. So that's a way to kind of think about it. Your company could look different. This is important, I think, with growth ops is plan initiatives. All of us have, many initiatives, but really do this with timing. This is kind of one of the practical things that I found. Most executives, I think, don't necessarily understand like the CPQ rollout and the time, or maybe you're doing an updated ideal customer profile exercise. Is that done in a day? Absolutely not. So it's really critical to work through, this is what we think our timeline is going to look like with a lot of these growth ops projects, because it just, you want to set expectations so that way people have an understanding of the time and effort that goes in. Communication is up there, and this is important. Again, a lot of folks, if you like data, you like operations, it's fun. I'm one of those people. I like to be in Excel. I like doing analysis, but it's really important to communicate. And I'm not going to read all of these, but I think there's definitely things that the team should start with. You know, where is our single source of truth? What is our plan of record? So do we have like our pipeline goals by region, the number of meetings, etc.? Is that articulated? Do we have agreement on our initiatives, right? As a team, is it CPQ this quarter? Is it something else? Shared SLAs, agreement on definitions, that type of stuff. Then you'll have your meetings that are at a weekly cadence. Maybe it's the forecast or pipeline call, your data review meeting that you have weekly. And again, depending on the size of company you're at, this can look a little bit different. So just keep that in mind. A larger company, there's going to be more of this, right? If you're a small company, you might look at this and say, wow, this is kind of a lot, Heidi, but you can get the sense of it and right size it. And then ongoing, you definitely want a way to review your programs, what's working, what's not. And I also think it's great to have an alias where you can get requests. So maybe that's Jira, maybe it's Slack, doesn't matter. But you need a way for people to, when they make requests, they don't go to someone's email. It's not just your Slack, because that could be a hole of despair. We need some way that we're going to organize that and keep track. Planning for scale. This is something all of us want to do, and a growth ops team is really well suited to help this. And I think it's important, just some ideas here that I've seen work really well. Certifications internally, having a test plan before a larger deployment happens, and then documentation of how things work. Again, especially if you're in a rapid growth mode, you're going to hire people quickly. People will be in and out of the business, and you can't let somebody have the keys to a system without having them be certified and know the way that your organization does things. And lastly, I'm going to end on metrics. And I think growth ops, this is again an example of some of the metrics a growth ops team can track and report on. I think these are great. And I think it's good to have, again, the idea here, it's a complete customer journey, so complete set of all these metrics. And we also want to get in the habit of benchmarking. So we started a project, let's get our baseline. How do we look after that improvement? That's a really great thing to be able to do. So our pipeline velocity started here. Hey, through a lot of our optimizations, we've made these improvements and now it's here. And overall efficiency and time savings. Because again, I think executives, all these numbers are great, but they ultimately want to know, with this team, what have we made more efficient? How have we made something more useful so we can ultimately, maybe our personalization is now better than ever, and that means more pipeline and revenue as an example. But these are some metrics that I think a growth ops team, some examples, you may have more or less, but again, you can see they cover everything from pipeline to goal, pipeline velocity to net promoter score, customer lifetime value, CAC, ARR, a lot of different things here that you can look at. And I think just get agreement from executives on what that should be. So with that, I'm going to end. I hope this was helpful. It was definitely, I would say, growth ops, the rapid version, but I hope you enjoyed this session and the rest of today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and definitely share anything that you learned today on social. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Heidi. That was super insightful. And the good news is that Heidi is live and here to take some questions. And we had a couple questions come up in the chat. So I want to start first with a question from Boris at Quarry. And his question is that in some cases, it doesn't make sense to have data operations within marketing, sales, and customer teams. And so he wants to know, what extent do you recommend integrating a data ops team into the growth ops function?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I think
To me, what I see are a few kind of ways you could look at that. I think it depends on the size of the company. And I think Boris is highlighting this, like at a larger organization, especially more of a, I would say a B2C organization, there's so much, the volume of data is so much more significant that there are more formal data operations teams. And the way I would think about it there, I don't want to get too caught up in just how we're naming teams, but the idea with even a good data operations team is, the point that I'm trying to make is, regardless of what you call it, the objective of this data is to drive growth for your company, right? That's really, data is our most valuable asset as an organization. If it's incorrect, if you have missing data, if it's poor data, you can't act on it. You can't create these great customer experiences that we're talking about. So my number one thing with growth ops is that, again, we just want to make sure that even with the data ops team, that they're collecting data from all the respective teams and they have one unified view of that data. So that's kind of, to me, the big takeaway. And that, again, that today what we're talking about is the reason we're calling it growth ops and not something else is because it has that customer-centric viewpoint. And we're not just, in our organizations looking at data without thinking about, okay, how is this going to impact a customer? How are we then taking this data and then activating it? I think that's an area many of us on this can relate to, where maybe a larger organization's great about collecting data, but if you're not activating it to drive growth, meaning you're able to actually use it and then personalize on your website, improve offers, just simple examples, then it's not good. So I hope that answered the question. Let me know.
Great, thank you. So another question we have from Beth McCullough. She's asking, where have you personally seen a strong example of a great B2B customer experience?
Ooh, that's a great B2B customer experience. I think a company that comes to mind for me just off the top is, I've seen good experiences personally from Drift. I've seen good experiences in my experience working with Gainsight. I also feel that those are two immediately that come to mind, because I think that the tone that they use, the way the emails, the way everything kind of comes together feels pretty relevant. But I will say, I love this question actually, because I think that B2B, and again, I'm in B2B right now myself, but I think that it lags a bit behind consumer companies, because consumer companies, they're a lot more, I think, on board with using technologies like CDPs, as I mentioned, so that way they can collect all the data, deliver it back out in more real time, and they just can do a lot more sophisticated marketing experiences. So to me, I'm excited. I think B2B can do a lot better here, but those are two companies that I personally think that do a really nice job, just in what I see from physical events to the emails I receive to just the overall experience. And to me, I hope everyone thinks about this when we talk about customer experience. It's how your SDRs respond, right? It's how they reach out. It's how somebody interacts with your educational content or that team. So it's really, again, it's so hyper dependent on data and what people have access to.
Wonderful. Next question we have from Neil Passero. He said he's curious about the foundation of CFO and CMO growth operations conversations, addressing fear, dealing with drama, building trust, and even, and he says gulp, fostering love.
That's a good question. Hey, Neil. Yeah, that's a really important one. I think every CMO knows that it's crazy not to have a strong and great relationship with a CFO. And again, I think that's why we're talking about a growth ops structure, to make sure that we have that one system of record, that one system of truth. So a CFO, when a CMO is presenting data, it's accurate, and the CFO isn't thinking wow, this person doesn't know what they're talking about because the revenue numbers they presented or the pipeline forecasting is not accurate, or, we didn't even really get into it here, but cost data, which is a whole other situation. But I think to me that the key with establishing trust is using data that everyone believes in is accurate. When we're talking about some of the numbers and metrics I had at the end, that the CFO is completely on board with, wow, the CMO just talked about CAC and it's improving, and I believe that. And to me, that again is depending on a good relationship with that CFO, but also that again, we're leveraging that one source of data that everyone believes in. I mean, that's so important. And that's kind of what I just want to, I'm super passionate about this because all of us on this have been in meetings where, I mean, to me, the QBR is the classic one, right? Where the marketing team goes in with some data and then it's like, hey, look at this great win. And then somebody inevitably in the room's like, well, interesting, that's not the number we have. And then it turns into this horrible mess of a discussion that if we just take this seriously from the beginning and we think about, let's make sure all these teams are, to me, really like working together and have that shared piece of data, it makes such a difference.
Could not agree more. And what's interesting, somebody said this to me, they said it shouldn't be a QBR, it should be a QBW, which is quit being wrong, because the data is so central to everything. So one last question, this one's actually from me, and I'm curious to hear about Customer Advisory Board. How has growth operations participated in experiences you have had with the Customer Advisory Board?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, I think my honest answer is not enough. I think, and they should, right? I think it's a great place to be because again, like customer advisory boards, assuming they're used in the right way, meaning I think some customer advisory boards are tricky because you get all this great input, and if you can't actually act on it, that's not always ideal. But I think for somebody in growth ops to sit on that and hear some of the perspective, and again, because all of us, I think what's powerful is we'd all love to have one-to-one conversations with our buyers. We can't, right? Like most of us are at organizations that sell to more than 5 people. So we need to use data signals to understand like, how is this all being received? And the great thing about a CAB is when you sit on it, you can actually hear, yeah, those emails, and I'm just using emails as an example, they're great. Like they're being received really well, or we really like your onboarding process. And I think that's that's a great point, and more of us should be doing that for sure. I also wanted to add really quick, I saw a question come in around territorialism in orgs and managing data. And I think, again, this is again why we want growth ops, because if you have one leader, and typically I see it's the CRO and the growth ops team reports into them, at least in B2B companies. I think somebody else earlier brought up data ops, and maybe in a B2C company, they report into somebody else. That's what gets rid of that territorialism. Like if everybody's reporting into one leader, it becomes less of an issue, because again, if you have, sales ops reporting into somebody, whether that's your CRO or your head of sales, and then marketing ops is reporting into the CMO, and I've definitely seen it with customer success, like even separate ops teams. And then it's like, oh my gosh, like it does get really tricky, right? Like marketing wants to send a customer email. Oh no, now we've got to go over to the customer success team to pull the data. That takes several days. It's just a real issue. So again, like that's why we want growth ops, so we don't see that territorialism, and just again, like kind of the unneeded pressure between groups just doesn't have to happen.
Excellent. Well, we do have to wrap questions, Heidi. We cannot thank you enough. This has been wonderful. And if you guys don't know what Tealium is, it is a company that does CDP, customer data platforms. So funny that Heidi would be so passionate about data, but thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. We're going to move on to Kate Federhar next, who is with CenturyLink. And if you remember earlier, I mentioned this is a Marketo 50 Fearless recipient. She's also the Pioneer OpsStars of the Year. And wait till you hear what she has to talk about. She's fantastic. So join me in welcoming Kate. And Kate, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for having me here today. My name's Kate Cindric Federhar, and I'm here to talk about something that to me is very funny, keeping the customer first. When I started in marketing operations, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, our customer was and always has been the marketing department. We were there to make sure the marketing departments were getting what they wanted. And now we've definitely seen a shift in the operations space on making sure what we're doing and what we're building is doing those things to keep the customer first and the customer first from our mindset. So who am I? I guess I'll start there. I'm the Director of Marketing Operations and Technology at CenturyLink. It's a really long, fancy title that means anything that is externally facing, anything that's touching our customers runs through my shop. I have a very nice counterpart, and she handles anything that is internally. How does marketing do operations? That's her part. My part is how do we kind of talk to the customer and talk to what's going on. It's interesting to me that this has come so far, because when I started in my job, I was what I lovingly called myself the OMO, only marketing operations. And now I have a team of 16 who are working really, really hard to make sure our customers, both internal and external, are getting the very best that we can provide to them every single day. So I own operational execution. So everything that is, I want to build an email, I want to build really anything that we have, all falls in my shop. I have a group of operators and a group of executors who I call the best in the business, and they all invest in really good headphones when they work for me, and they put their heads down and are a machine. And it's great because they're a machine across platforms, across different things, and across everything that's going on, which is really our ability to add value to the business. Because I also own all of the technology. So everything lands in my shop, which is a huge change for us. I would say a year and a half ago, we went through a giant merger where $18 billion company came together with another $18 billion company. And the decision, right, wrong, or indifferent, was made that technology lives with me and with my boss, Scott. What that meant was we'd sit in meetings and have people say, well, that's technology, Kate owns it. And I'd go, oh, Google, let me see what that does. And we ended up with 90 pieces of technology. We've slowly whittled that down and gotten it to about 35, and we got them categorized. So marketing technology obviously lives in my shop. I've owned our Marketo instance for about 8 years now, and everything that bolts onto that, from event execution to conversational AI, all of that stuff lives within the technology ecosphere and lives with my MarTech team. Our advertising tech team also lives in my shop. So this is kind of new for us and kind of different from where it used to live, and lived very, very far away. And now we own how are we getting things to our media partners. What does our LiveRamp relationship look like? What does Google and our Google advertising look like? All of that is living in my shop because I think they've kind of decided if it has a plug, it's operations, so we own it. We are brought in very early in that, and to make sure everything's going to function and everything's going to work. All the people who want to place the pretty ads and do all the fun stuff, great. They get us involved very, very early. And the most recent one that I've taken over in the past couple months is web technology. So we are an Adobe shop at CenturyLink, and our web technology lives with me. So I own our Adobe Sites contract, I own our Target, I own our analytics. And those kind of combinations have really started to move the needle, because you used to have to go all the way to, in some cases, the CEO to get us to a common leader, even if you're talking about the website versus marketing operations. By moving that decision down and moving that decision to my level, because I own the operations teams who are going to talk to campaign people and going to talk to operators, they're starting to bring more to the table and say, hey, have you thought about, guy who wants to put on a great webinar, putting web personalization in place for this? Have you tweaked the copy of your email to make sure everything that's going out to people on this list are doing things? We're starting to be seen as a value add to campaign executors and campaign people because we're bringing those things to the forefront, which means we're being brought in so much earlier and so much faster in the process and being relied upon so heavily. I've calls later today that are strategic thinking for the next 3 years of the entire company from a creative perspective, and they've got us involved now because they want to know what we're doing, what we're thinking, what can we do, how far can we start pushing the envelope. And we as technologists and operators are then sitting back and saying, okay, I can hear where you're trying to go. I can hear what you're trying to do. What can I start to bring to the table and bring to the party for everybody else from there? So when I talk about this and when I kind of go back to this and listening to Heidi's presentation, I just wanted to reply and go, ditto, and then, everybody could get some time back in their day. But what does the customer want? And I have to simplify this because my mom asks me what I do all day. And so here's what I do. I sell the internet. Half of the world's internet traffic's on CenturyLink fiber. So she understands that to mean I sell internet for people who want to buy it at their house. I actually sell way more internet to B2B. People who want us to, lay fiber across the Atlantic, people who need data centers, people who need hosting, people who need technology. But it's mainly that B2B experience. But what they want and what they truly are passionate about is to have the exact same experience that I get as a customer. We're all in a global pandemic and working from home, and it's bright, sunny blue skies here in Denver right now. What we want as B2B buyers is the Amazon experience, the Zulily experience. I was shopping because my daughter needed new sandals to go outside and play in the sprinkler. And I didn't have time, I didn't click through. But I got an email reminding me about those same sandals that she needs. When I went to Amazon because I needed to buy something else, that was the first thing that popped up. When, for B2B, you're talking to a sales rep, you want that holistic experience. My B2B customers sometimes have 18-month, 2-year, 3-year sales cycles, but they want their email to match what their sales rep is talking about. They want to visit the website and have that be the right thing. If they're talking about cloud and they're talking about security, they don't want networking. They want to make sure they are marketed to with the right message at the right time and have that message be consistent. I will tell you, as a legacy telephone company born of the Bell split, this is not something that's fast, it's not something that's easy, and it's not something that we've traditionally been really, really good at, to be frank. People were sending emails that were talking about products that people couldn't buy. People were putting web pages up there because it's somebody's baby and some brainchild of somebody's product, and building and building and building. And by pulling that all together and by getting us closer, I'll say, to where we want to be, that's really helping us take that lens of what does the customer want? What do they want from an experience, and what do they want to buy? So that is our mantra. That's how we go through that. I will say that this is a journey, not a destination. So growth ops and revenue ops and all of those different things are funny to me because I work at the telephone company. So our title, like marketing ops, is still new for us. So our titles aren't going to change, but what we do continues to evolve. And I've been in marketing ops for 8 years. first I got a Marketo instance, and that was new and shiny and all of those kinds of things. And as we continue to move and continue to evolve and we get more things, people are starting to see the value and then giving us more kind of autonomy, more technology, more budget, all of those kinds of things. But it's been a slow growth and a slow destination. To us, what's helped that is the structure of the org to get there. And what has been the most important thing for us is that consolidation. I know Heidi talked about it kind of consolidating from a sales enablement perspective or from a reporting and analytics perspective. We have a giant company. So I work at a company with 50,000 people. Decentralized organizational model is what we grew up with. It's what we came from. I can tell you that there's reporting and analytics organizations in each of my 7 BUs that I report or that I support, as well as centralized ones, as well as ones in finance and all of those kinds of things. We're not going to be able to control all of those things, but we can get to, at least in an operational space, that centralized organizational model. And for us, it's those coming together of technology. When we had those 90 pieces of technology, there were so many unicorns, as I like to call them, where somebody wanted some very specific piece, very specific thing that they're off in their own world. They're doing what they want to do, and it doesn't integrate. It doesn't talk to anything, and it doesn't help our customers get to where they need to be, because all of a sudden they're getting an email that looks completely differently than anything they've ever gotten, or they're visiting a landing page that they're being sent down to. So centralizing for us has been key, and centralizing, frankly, at a lower level. I don't need to go all the way up to the CMO to get a web page changed, because I own that team too. I can simply turn and pivot and say, hey, I need this URL. I need this over here. I need all of these different elements, and we can do that. And my team is very good at talking to each other so that they're staying up on new features and functionalities. Every release notes that come out, is there something else we can do? I don't have an unlimited budget. I don't think anyone does. And if you do and you're hiring, call me. But at this point, I don't have an unlimited budget. So every dollar I can save on a piece of technology, I can invest in something I can't do. So it's also helping us really save money. If you drop 40 pieces from your tech stack, 50 pieces from your tech stack, and granted, this is at our size and scale, you get a little bit of money back. You're a hero to the finance team because you're giving some back. And I always treat it as a trade-off. I'll give you a little bit of money, but I want some of that because I'm going to try something else. What's the best way to get there? So as I said, I've been working in marketing ops for years, and my boss owns the database, and we'd sit in staff meetings and they'd talk about data. And I'm not even lying to you, I would make my grocery list, or I would try to figure out what we're having for dinner that night, because it really wasn't important for me to talk about staging tables and all of these kinds of things. I was the person who sent out emails. Somebody sent me a list at the end of the day and I sent out emails. Well, now data's king. We have to get all of our data into a centralized location for every single system. This for us is super complicated. We have everything in a data lake and we push everything there because we have to know what fiber can you get to your house? How many gigs can you get? Do we have this capability on this side of the street or that side of the street? We started with, can we put it all into a Marketo? Can we put it all into an Adobe? We quickly outgrew those systems and got to that centralized location and are pumping every ad we place, every email we send, every single thing we've got going on into that data lake so that we can start pumping that out to people, so that our Marketo system can understand if a web page has been visited, and switch somebody from a nurture stream into a different nurture stream. We want to pump as much data into that data lake as possible. And frankly, and I know there are vendors on this call, we ditch tools that won't get our data connected. It's our data. We're trying to give that holistic customer experience. And we've had vendors protest and say, but you don't need all of the data. You don't need all of this information. But we do. We utilize it. We take care of it. We make sure we're looking at that customized customer experience. And if you won't give it to us, we call you an island. Islands are great for going to Mexico and having cocktails on the beach and all of those kinds of things. When it comes to our tech stack, if you're an island, we get rid of you as quickly as is humanly possible, because I guarantee you, I can do what your piece of tech can do with a different piece of tech. I can get that better and get it integrated into our entire system. Connectivity is the other thing. So we want all the data. We want to have as much as we possibly can. But then I have to have those tools talk to each other in as much of a real-time basis as possible. Some of it's not possible. If you visit a website at noon and I send you an email at 12:01, I'm not going to have the content adjusted in that email fast enough. It's already been scheduled. We already know what it's going to be. But we have what we call the three-pronged approach and the three-legged stool. So you have to be able to talk to Salesforce, Marketo, the data lake. You don't necessarily have to be able to talk to all three at the same time. We like you to be able to talk to at least two of the three so that we can make those real-time changes. We can be serving up content to our sales team in sales enablement tools based on everything else that we've got going on. We've got to be able to talk to our email platform and our web platform and our targeting platform. So as much as we can get that we'll talk to each other, we try to do that in everything that we do. So why is this important? Why am I talking about putting the customer first? Because my expectation as someone who buys a lot of technology and is a B2B consumer from a giant budgetary perspective is I expect to be treated like Amazon. I expect to know what sandals have to be purchased on what day, or getting an email that I could possibly be out of milk. Those are the important things. And that's what I expect, and that's what my customers expect. They need those thought leadership pieces from our sales team about what's important for them, because their sales cycle is still going on, but it's still important. They need those, quick wins and quick hits from us every minute of the day. We've centralized it. We've brought it in together. You can call us growth ops. You can call us revenue ops. You can call us marketing ops. You can call us whatever you want. We really don't care. But for us, it's getting technology to work for us, getting technology in the same place, and making sure we're consciously putting that customer first, consciously putting everything we do into that central place so that we can go from there. I am live, so I am happy to answer any questions that anybody has for me. Melissa, I know I'm running really close to time, so I apologize, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you.
I'm going to go ahead and ask a question here around, you talked about data lakes, and Heidi also talked about, that data ownership. That question had come up. And my question for you is, in regards to data ownership, how are you all involved in the data quality work that goes on?
Well, a lot of different ways. For us, data quality is kind of falls into a couple different things. The first one is, our team is responsible for list purchases, data augmentation, all of those kinds of things. falls in our shop from a budgetary perspective. Some business units have very specialized needs, so they can go from there. They can, purchase very specialized lists, but that happens. We also own all of the relationships with our data providers who are going to help us clean the data, cleanse the data, and make sure that's proliferated across systems. So bad email addresses, bounces. We own those relationships and that kind of master relationship. And then last, we work very, very hard to make sure from an internal systems perspective, all of our data is as clean as we can make it based on the information we have, regardless of outside sources. So we have 28 different data sources that all feed into our data lake. Don't quote me on 28, it changes daily, but everything from billing and finance systems to Salesforce systems to marketing systems, everything's feeding into our sales or our data lake. And we're working every single day to make sure, okay, is it picking the right information? Do we have additional information from, revenue and from billing and finance that we can use to augment our Salesforce? Is marketing picking up information like bad bounced emails? Can we proliferate that across the board? My team and me specifically are very intimately involved in how are we keeping our Salesforce clean? How are we making sure our Salesforce instance is as nice as we can possibly make it? And when I hear people from smaller companies talk about that, it's hard for them to understand scale, but I delete millions literally of leads out of our Salesforce instance every single week because we use our systems like an inverse pyramid. We have our database and our data lake set up top with about 40 million contacts in it. Below that is our marketing stack, marketing elements like Marketo and things like that. We've got about 10 to 15 million there, and our Salesforce has got about 1.5 to 2 million at any given time. We've regular purges. So we want to push the best stuff down and not push anything that isn't relevant down and into the system.
Excellent. Yeah, data is the devil, and it is the greatest thing ever and the worst thing ever for sure. So the other questions I have from you is coming from Chi from our board, and her question is, how do you organize a 16-person team around the technology and process excellence? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so there's two different sides of my team. So there's process and operations, and those are organized around the 7 different business units I support. And what that means is our small business team goes to a very nice lady named Julia every single time they need something. She farms things out. She has, if our enterprise business unit doesn't have a lot going on, she can farm out emails or, hey, I need help building this. But everybody has a single point of contact. To us, that was really, really important because we were all over the place. I think last year, 768 intakes to our team. There were too many emails going back and forth. There was too much stuff. So everybody has a single point of contact. That single point of contact might have multiple groups coming to them, but my operations team, there's always one person you talk to. And then our technology team is organized by type of technology, which seems weird to say, but our technology team, there is a lead for marketing technology. There's a lead for advertising technology. There's a lead for legal technology. Everything kind of rolls up into them because then they can see across platform, they can see across everything we've got going on and make sure they're covering their bases. They've got everything that we need. And then they can go to other people and say, hey, I need to link into Marketo. There is a leader of that type of technology. Here's what I need to do. And then they work together for that. They all talk to each other all day long.
Excellent. Another question that came in, you have a massive tech stack. And can you share with us some learnings that you had from that? Like what were some key takeaways that you've had for onboarding and offboarding technology?
Yeah, if it's not simple, we don't do it. That's our first one, is keep it simple, stupid. And it's funny that you think we have a massive stack and we've cut it in half in the last year. So I think it's pretty small, but when we onboard somebody and when we onboard something, we want to make 100% sure it's done right and it's done well. So we will take the time and onboard somebody slowly, get them the connections they need, get them everything that they want, so that we've got it and we do it well. This is my key point to my team every single day. Everybody wants me to do 600 things. There are 8-9 hours in a work day. I'm going to do one thing and I'm going to do it well, and then I'm going to pick up something else. So for us, onboarding technology is taking the time, giving them the resources, giving them everything that they want, so that we're onboarding them and getting every single thing out of it. And you know, Melissa, if you ever want to do this again, I actually have a tech stack magic quadrant that that we've created.
Ooh.
To, I know, it's fun and exciting. We have a tech stack magic quadrant that we have developed and we run through on a regular basis to make sure we're getting the most out of our tech stack. Because if they're low in the magic quadrant, we will boot them, or we will figure out, can we do something using that? Or is there a reason they are in our low end of our magic quadrant?
Excellent. Well, we'll definitely have to have you back and run us through that. So we're going to go ahead and wrap with Kate. And
Thanks,
we have
guys.
Chrissy coming up next here. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I love, you know, the keep it simple, stupid method for sure. And so thank you again. And we're going to go ahead and move over to Chris. But before we do that, I just have a real quick announcement. We are trying to get Growth Ops trending as much as we can here. And so we'd appreciate any retweets. We've got some stuff we're sharing. We're using hashtag TGOC, so TGOC, and then hashtag Growth Ops. So we'd appreciate that. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Chrissy. He is the author of Blitzscaling, which is on sale on Amazon, as well as in an audiobook and for a real live book, if you still do that, and I do. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome Chris E. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and I'm going to seize control of the screen because I'm so excited about doing this. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. It is so important. Everyone is so focused on this pandemic right now. People are failing to really understand the role of growth. And what I'm hoping to do is to spend some time today talking about why growth still matters and how you can best take advantage of the situation and find that silver lining. So I've titled this talk, Growth in the Time of and After the Coronavirus, because I feel like this is something that's affecting all of us. And it's something that, especially as growth operations people, you need to consider how to demonstrate your value during this time, and then the essential role you'll play once the virus begins to recede. So first, we have to begin with a definition of blitzscaling. We define blitzscaling in the book as the pursuit of rapid growth by prioritizing speed over efficiency in the face of uncertainty. And you know, people aren't talking a lot about growth right now. They're talking a lot about survival. So how is this relevant? Well, when we think about the reason for pursuing rapid growth, we say the reason we pursue rapid growth is because we believe that we are tackling a winner-take-most market. Because the internet has connected us all together, more and more markets today are winner-take-most or winner-take-all, which means that whoever is the first to win that race, to be the first to scale, is likely to have enduring market leadership for years or even decades to come, during which time they can reap enormous rewards, enormous profits. And so when we look at blitzscaling, we say, well, in situations where you have the following growth factors, it makes sense to go ahead and blitzscale, to pursue speed over efficiency. The first, of course, is having a big market. this is necessary because if you're going to spend money now in order to make a lot more money later on, you're going to need a big market in which to do it. But the key distinction is it's not necessarily the present market. It's where the market is going to be in the next couple of years. Because really the people who succeed are the ones who make correct predictions about the future. If you went back in time and you said, what is the market for any particular product? There's a famous study that McKinsey did that said that there would only be a market for about 20,000 cell phones total in the world by the year 2000. Obviously that was incorrect. There was a study that IBM did saying that the total market for personal computers would be about 6 people in the world. Again, that was incorrect. So making that correct assumption about that future market is really important. The second is the distribution strategy you employ. It's really critical to have strong distribution. Because the goal is to achieve market leadership, you need to get your product or service into people's hands. This is where growth operations comes in. And the ability to make that distribution work, to operationalize it, to make it work as smoothly and effectively as possible is a big part of whether or not you should blitzscale. If you don't have a good growth operations team, it's really a bad idea to blitzscale. The third is gross margins, because at the end of the day, every business is put on this planet in order to make money. There may be other purposes, such as achieving some sort of social good or social impact. But without the gross margins, without the profits, then you don't have the ability to build a sustainable business. And the higher the gross margins you're able to achieve in your core business, the more valuable it's going to be to investors or to the public markets, and the greater the reward you're going to be able to reap in order to offset the risks that you're taking. Finally, we talk about network effects and product market fit. Network effects are essential because they're the ones that are really responsible for the market dynamic of a winner-take-most market. A network effect could be a communications network like a Facebook, or a two-sided marketplace like an Airbnb. There are even other forms of network effects like the Microsoft Windows operating system, or the iOS operating system, or the Android operating system. But the point is that when you have network effects in play, each additional node on the network, each additional person who adopts as a user or a customer makes the whole thing more valuable to all the previous user base. And what this does is it creates super linear value, that familiar hockey stick. And what it means is once you've achieved a lead in that market, if it's a winner-take-most market with network effects, it becomes very difficult to dislodge. If you think about companies like eBay or Craigslist, which have essentially not changed their product for over 20, 25 years, and yet still retain market leadership in their chosen markets, it demonstrates the power of network effects. You can take a couple of decades off and still be making billions of dollars a year. Craigslist runs with a staff of 20 people in a mansion in San Francisco. Obviously, they're socially distancing right now, but they generate $1 billion a year in free cash flow. And that's the power of that network effect. The final thing is the product market fit. Product market fit, I'm sure many people have heard of because of the lean startup and 3 steps of the epiphany. The product market fit is all about whether or not you've built something that the market really wants. And product market fit is really important, but it's really a necessary but insufficient factor. If you have product market fit, it doesn't guarantee that you should blitzscale, but if you lack product market fit, you definitely should not. And that's because without product market fit, you can't have sustainable success. There are companies that have come and gone with remarkable fads, whether it's an HQ Trivia, which The Ringer is writing about, or whether it's a product like Groupon, which was very popular once upon a time. These are things that grew incredibly quickly, that had lots of customers, that appeared to have all these factors going for them, but did not fundamentally provide a good customer experience, did not have that true long-term product market fit. And as a result, they have ultimately gone the way of the dinosaur. So that's a real discussion of blitzscaling. But now the question is, how does it make sense in terms of your company? Well, when you're blitzscaling, because you're pursuing rapid growth and you're pursuing speed instead of efficiency, you have to undertake a number of different counterintuitive rules. There are a variety of things that you have to do that are very different than business as usual. And one of the things I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and pop open the chat question, because we only have limited time. I cannot go over all of these, I'm afraid, but I can allow you to decide. So I see some questions coming in, so I'll answer the questions at the end, but what I would love you to do right now is to say which of these counterintuitive rules you'd like me to cover. And if you put it in the chat room, I will pick, let's say, 2 of them to answer. So I'll see which 2 emerge in the chat room. So go ahead, take the chat room and go ahead and ask questions. I see an answer from Jen for let fires burn. Kate Athler, let fires burn, do things that don't scale, with exclamation marks nonetheless. Thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate that. Tolerate bad management from Melissa. Ignore your customers from Chichi. So fires is do things that don't scale, and fires burn are currently in the lead, 2 and 2. Oh, ignore your customers has come in. Now it's tied for 3 at 2, 2 and 2. Ignore your customers surges into the lead. Oh my goodness, this is exciting. It's almost like a horse race. I bet, you know, some of those online betting platforms would start taking bets on this. Do things that don't scale is now up. To launch a product that embarrasses you. Ignore your customers continues to be in the lead. All right. So let's go with ignore your customers and do things that don't scale. Those are the ones that have surged into the lead. And I'm going to go talk about each of them in turn. Ignore your customers basically means that there are times when you need to ignore your current customers in order to best serve the needs of your future customers. So a classic example of this is that when my co-author, Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, the first investor at Facebook, and all these other remarkable things, was at PayPal. PayPal was a very successful company back in the first internet boom. It was famously started by Peter Thiel and Max Levchin. Later on, they merged with a company started by a guy named Elon Musk. So it was a remarkable assembly of talent. Reid was there as a founding board member and executive. And at one point, PayPal had finally gotten to the point where they really had achieved product market fit. They actually started, by the way, as encryption on cell phones. So you can imagine there were a lot of pivots along the way to go from that to payments via email. But they finally settled on payments via email. And that had allowed them to really begin growing. And at that point, the company was actually growing 2 to 5% a day, which is pretty remarkable growth. I mean, it may not be as fast as the growth of a global pandemic, but it's pretty darn close. And at that rate, the company was growing so quickly that there were people signing up, they were trying to make payments, they were running into problems, and they would try to reach out to customer service. And the only customer service option was an email address. And they had a total of 2 people answering emails on an email address. So you can imagine that made things a bit challenging. Those 2 people could answer about 50 emails a day, and they were getting about 200 emails a day. So every day the company was getting further and further behind in terms of answering those customer emails. And so the customers really wanted help. They went to this old-fashioned thing called a phone book and looked up the telephone number for PayPal. PayPal was listed in what was then known as the white pages in Palo Alto. People began calling that number. Now, there was no receptionist. There was no front desk. There was just an answering machine service that would say, "Hi, you've reached PayPal. If you know your party's extension, please dial it now." And people were so determined to get customer service, they would begin punching in numbers at random. And so the net effect was that when you considered the phone system at PayPal, every single day, 24 hours a day, all the phones in the office were ringing off the hook. And if you picked up the phone, you would get an angry customer yelling at you, asking, "Where the hell is my money?" So this is a classic example of a situation. What do you do about those customers? And there are a variety of things you could do. The first thing you could do is you could say, well, we have 40 employees, only 2 of them are doing customer service. Let's take our employees and put them on customer service. We can more than double, more than triple, more than quadruple our customer service capacity just by reallocating our people. Another thing to do would be to throttle the new accounts. Man, we're growing super fast. Those new customers are the ones who keep coming and calling up with questions. What if we throttled it and just focused on serving our existing customers? These are all things that they could have done. But the problem with each of those is that they would have caused the company to slow down. So if you, for example, were to reallocate your people from other things like building the product to answering customer service emails, well, first of all, those people may not be very good at it. But second, you're dramatically slowing down the progress of the company. The same thing holds true if you're going to throttle the new customers coming in. My God, you've just achieved product market fit. People are coming in droves. You're growing 2 to 5% a day. Keep growing. And so what they did was they unplugged the phones and told everyone to use their cell phones. And that solved the problem, at least temporarily, not forever. What they eventually did is after they raised a lot more money, another $100 million, and they had the resources to throw some money at the problem, they actually opened a customer service call center in Omaha, Nebraska. They hired 100 people the first weekend. Half of those had quit within 30 days, but fortunately there are a lot of people who live in Omaha, Nebraska. And today there are 5,000 customer service employees of PayPal in Omaha, Nebraska. And that's an example of how you can ignore your current customers in order to better serve your future customers, in order to achieve the kind of growth that makes your payment system a universal standard. Now, the second question was do things that don't scale. And do things that don't scale is really important because oftentimes as we're doing things, especially in growth operations, where part of our watchword is we're the process people, we figure out how to make things run smoothly. We often try to build things out in order to accommodate different levels of scale. But the problem is the whole goal is just to get to that next stage. And oftentimes it is faster to hack things together, to do things that don't scale in order to learn as quickly as possible. And that's because half the things you try are going to fail. So why spend the time carefully architecting things up front? Maybe you could spend a little time thinking about so you don't go down an irretrievable rat hole. But in general, you're better off moving quickly. So the example here is Airbnb. In the early days of the company, while they were still very small, they discovered they had a problem. And that problem was that people were not renting enough rooms. They would get to Airbnb, they'd go look up a room, and then they'd leave. And they're like, what's going on? And they found a couple of hosts who, for whatever reason, people would go to their rooms and they would book. They're like, why are these different? And they checked it out, and what they discovered was that the hosts that were being successful actually had more professional photographs. It turns out that most people took their own photographs, and most people suck at photography. So they had bad pictures. So the question was, how do you solve this problem? At this point, it's a 3-person company, 3 founders living in one place, working out of somebody's living room. So how did they solve the problem? The founders flew out to New York, where the preponderance of hosts were. They borrowed some friends' cameras because they went to design school, and they went door to door to each different host and said, hi, I'm here from Airbnb, and I'm here to take photographs of your place for your room listing. And that was the founders doing it, and that obviously was not something that was scalable, but it was the fastest way to figure out if we got professional photographers to do this, would it actually work? Would it actually change the numbers? And then when it did, what they did was they began drafting their friends from design school, paid them a few bucks to take the photographs and manage it with an Excel spreadsheet. Then eventually that was too much, and so they got an intern in for the summer to manage the Excel spreadsheet. And by the time that intern finished at the end of the summer and dropped out of school and stayed with Airbnb, which will probably turn out to be a good idea, they decided, okay, now it's the time to bring in an engineer to build a system to actually automate this process. And today, if you're an Airbnb host, you know that when you sign up, there is actually a process by which they dispatch a photographer to your home to take photographs for your listing. And that's all handled in an automated software way, but it couldn't have really been done if they started off when they had 3 people in a living room and said, let's build out this giant system. So do things that don't scale is oftentimes the way to get there faster, even though it means you're going to be throwing stuff out along the way. You're going to be redoing work. Doesn't matter, because the goal is to learn as quickly as possible. So that was a couple of counterintuitive rules. By the way, you can find all of these counterintuitive rules and all the stories about them in the book Blitzscaling, available at fine bookstores everywhere. So now we come to the big elephant in the room, which is the coronavirus. Pretty scary stuff, especially if you are, like me, somebody who is an author who goes around the world talking about rapid growth. So what has coronavirus done to us as a result of this? Well, if you think about it, oops, hold on, I need to just change the size of my chat window. It was blocking things. If you think about it, what we've done is we've now entered a situation where we have to do what I call sailing against the wind. There are headwinds for most businesses because of the economic impact, especially if you're an in-person business. But for those of you, fortunately, are largely working in e-commerce, even if the wind is somewhat in your favor, e-commerce revenues have increased, there's still rapid changes. Consumer behavior is not what it was 60 days ago. And there may be more rapid changes to come as we exit lockdown. Perhaps there's a second wave of infections, who knows? And so that's the metaphor I want you to keep in mind. Everyone is being buffeted by these winds, you and your competitors. And your ability to be nimble and to sail against the wind, to make progress even during these tough times, or to take advantage of rapid shifts in the winds is going to be your competitive differentiation. Before, during good times, it's a fairly straightforward all-out sprint. Just go straight ahead, go as fast as you can. But in this environment, you may not be sprinting all out in one direction. You may be very rapidly juking and jiving, twisting and turning in order to find the best possible path through that hurricane. And in doing so, we have to redefine blitzscaling. So instead of talking about it as the pursuit of rapid growth by prioritizing speed over efficiency, it's the pursuit of rapid change to take advantage of these swift shifts in the market that hopefully you're able to figure out. And the question is, how do you do that? Well, there are really two stages to this. The first is the pre-vaccine stage, which is going to be this for the rest of this year. By the way, people keep talking about how there aren't going to be vaccines. There are going to be vaccines. I have spoken with a friend of mine who is a former biotech company CEO, took that company public, very much in touch with a lot of the leading lights in the pharmaceutical industry, chief of research at major pharmaceutical company X and Y and so on and so forth. And they are all very confident. They have 100 vaccines in development. The coronavirus is a relatively simple virus in terms of the protein structure and not mutating nearly so quickly. It's not something like HIV, which we were never able to get a vaccine for. They are extremely confident that they'll be able to develop a vaccine. But it will still take time. They've got 100 vaccines in development. Only 10 of them are going to work. We're going to have to figure out which 10. They're going to have to run trials, and it'll take some time for all that data to come back. So during that time, we're still going to be facing what I characterize as a caution flag situation. If you've ever watched NASCAR, you know if there's an accident, if there's a problem, they'll throw up the caution flag and they'll bring out that caution car with the yellow light in front. And everyone will slow down and sort of be moving at relatively the same pace. Now, the difference is this is not a NASCAR race. You can keep moving faster than your competitors, even while the caution flag is down. You just have to do so in a smarter way. So what you have to do is you have to in order to maximize the speed of learning, you're going to maximize it and minimize the cost. If you think about it, as a company, you're spending money on your marketing campaigns, you're spending money on salary, you're spending money every single day. So maximizing the efficiency of a particular marketing campaign is not nearly as important as maximizing the speed from which you can draw a conclusion, from which you're able to tell which direction the wind is blowing and then adjusting accordingly. And the other thing I would say is, again, some people are going to run into this issue. Sometimes if you're in a particular market, like I have companies that are in the travel space, guess what? That's going to be really hard to make any short-term gains. Doesn't matter. Everyone's severely affected by this caution flag. So when it's hard to come by short-term gains, it's also a great time to invest in capability. So all those things that you've always thought we need to do, let's try to actually do them right now. Let's take the time and turn our staff onto the things that were in what Stephen Covey would call quadrant 2, important but non-urgent. Now is the perfect time to do them. But don't forget, the goal is not to build the most efficient, finely tuned machine. The goal is to build the most agile, adaptable machine that can shift according to the different winds that come along. Then we're going to enter the post-vaccine era. That's going to be 2021 and later. And here, eventually, we're going to see the caution flag lifted. The interesting thing, of course, is there's not going to be a single announcement that says, hey guys, now is the time to go. Everything's safe, let's go. In fact, if you are able to read the tea leaves and understand when the flag is likely to be lifted before other people understand that, you can actually get a running start and accelerate out of the pandemic, perhaps growing your company even further. As growth operations folks, this is your moment. This is your time to say, we are going to be able to support rapid regrowth or even growth beyond the pre-pandemic levels if we have been able to position ourselves in a better position relative to our competitors. And so here, what I would say is that people need to start thinking about what I call quick trigger growth. The first thing you need to do is you need to determine and then monitor your KLIs, your key leading indicators, the things that are going to tell you before the sales start to come back, before the standard metrics that people use. What are the early metrics, whether it is web traffic, whether it is conversion, whether it is engagement, all these things. You need to figure out what the key learning indicators, the key leading indicators are for your particular business, and then monitor them. So that as you see them begin to surge back in a sustained way, you can get that running start. You can begin the process of growth before everyone else does. Just like you would be better off if you figured out what was happening, you prepared in advance, you got everyone ready to work from home before this pandemic hit. The people who are able to figure out when we're going to exit this are going to be able to go much faster and be much more effective. So I'm going to go ahead, and I know we want to take a few minutes at the end for questions. So just a quick recap on the overall situation. Blitzscaling is all about pursuing rapid change by prioritizing speed over efficiency in the face of uncertainty. There's specific techniques that you can use, like we talked about, whether it's letting fires burn, ignoring your customers, launching a product that embarrasses you, and so on and so forth. Those blitzscaling techniques are relevant, not just in the period of time when you're all out sprinting a la Usain Bolt in a straight line, but during the time in which you're really trying to be nimble and dodging from place to place. through that storm, sailing against the wind. And remember, I expect there to be significant headwinds. There's significantly changed market for much of 2020, but I do believe you're going to see a rebound in 2021. And I think that those people who are prepared for that rebound, who are anticipating it and can get that running start, are going to be the ones who are that much further towards winning the race. So with that, I will open it up to questions from the chat room. I saw a couple that had already come through, so I will start answering those first. But meanwhile, everyone just go ahead and keep adding questions to the chat room. So the first question was from Amy: do you need all of these growth factors? How many justify blitzscaling? So that is an interesting thing. One of the things I've done is I've actually started a venture capital firm to invest based on these ideas. And we have a model for assessing the blitzscalability of potential investments. And the two most important factors are, in fact, the network effects or land grab element, i.e., is this a winner take most market? And the distribution element. In other words, is there a clear path to, with relatively little capital, grow and dominate the marketplace? When those two things are there, then it makes a lot more sense to blitzscale, and it dramatically increases the value to an investor, which of course increases the value to you, the entrepreneur. Now, it is still the case that you need to have more or less some variation of all of these. You don't have to be a perfect 10 in all of them. But if you have like a 0 in, for example, gross margin, it's really tough to make it work. So a great example of this is if you look at WeWork. A lot of people have been looking at WeWork over the past year, ever since their failed IPO. SoftBank recently wrote them down to $2.9 billion in value after SoftBank had originally last invested at $47 billion. That's quite a come down. SoftBank has invested $18 billion in cash into the company, and now it's valued at $2.9 billion. So that tells you something about how disastrous that's been. WeWork has a number of problems, but the two biggest problems are that, first of all, there is no network effect or land grab. Despite the term land grab, signing office spaces is not a land grab because there's plenty of other office spaces in every city in which WeWork operates. So there was no way for them to really lock down that marketplace. And the second thing is their gross margins. WeWork achieved the same revenue per square foot as their stodgy competitors like Regus, now known as IWT. And despite that, they had expenses that were twice as high. Well, that's like a negative 100% gross margin. It's really hard to make that work. It's not like selling $1 for 90 cents. It's like selling $1 for 50 cents. Yeah, people are willing to take you up on it, but there is no way to achieve that long-term profitability with that kind of a model. All right, other questions that people have asked. There was another question along the way, as I recall. Let's see, what was that other question? Oh,
So
go ahead.
did you find it?
No, I didn't.
I was going to say that the question was from Amy, and she asked, do you need all of these factors for blitzscaling, and how many do you need to have to justify doing it?
Yes. So as I said, I think that what you absolutely have to do is you have to have those network effects or land grabs in place. Again, even if you're not a blitzscalable company, what you can do is you can apply the techniques of blitzscaling, especially during a time like this when you need to move as quickly as possible to be adaptable. But for classic blitzscaling, where you're trying to grow and take over a multi-billion-dollar market, those network effects and land grabs have to be in place. Same for distribution. The other ones are still important. You would never want to spend $1 billion to scale up in $1 million market. So obviously the market size matters. And as I mentioned, product market fit has to be there in order for it to be sustainable. And then finally, the gross margins have to be at least somewhat there. The interesting thing about gross margins is there are companies like Amazon, for example, whose retail business doesn't necessarily have that great a gross margin, but we're able to grow anyways. And that's primarily because Amazon and Jeff Bezos were masterful at being able to ultimately build out their logistical infrastructure to be more efficient than everyone else, and were masterful at raising money from the financial markets and getting the financial markets to take their claims of investment seriously. Amazon is worth so much money not because it's wildly profitable, although there are elements of the company that are wildly profitable, such as Amazon Web Services, but because people believe that Amazon is playing the long game. Amazon is investing capital in order to gain competitive advantages over its competitors, and its competitive advantages get stronger and stronger. And Amazon could at this point use some of those competitive advantages to instead reap higher profits, But instead, what Amazon has actually done is it has said, we're going to invest in further growth. We're going to keep on sprinting. We don't want to relax and take it easy as we're jogging along. We want to keep going with an all-out sprint because we think we can win even more races. So the other question that came from Kate, I missed it because it had come in towards the end, was do you call horse racing as a side hobby? And the answer is no, although if you decide to run a racehorse and you want me to call horse racing, I'm happy to join in, just like calling a sporting event would. Funny enough, one of my business partners, Tom Kugler, and I started a company called Wasabi Ventures together, where we have built a number of different companies and invested in quite a number of companies. And he eventually wanted to build something called Wasabi Ventures Stables, which is a fractional horse racing ownership club. So in fact, even though I'm not the horse racing guy, I am actually part owner in a series of racing horses and thoroughbred studs. Okay, Melissa asks, what should companies need to prepare, and what do people on this call need to do to help leadership get ready and focus that stage? Yes. So this is one of the things that is most important because, of course, as growth operations, you still have to convince the senior management team or perhaps the CEO of the company that this is what you should be doing. And the question you should pose to them is this, which is, if our business has been impacted, will we at some point need to grow faster than we were growing before to get back to where we wanted to be? The answer, of course, is yes. Mathematically, if your business has been affected, if you want to get back on track, you're going to have to grow even faster than before. And that means that the organization is going to have to be able to accommodate faster growth than before, which means that growth operations is going to be more important than before. And you should pitch to them, him or her, that this is the opportunity to build up the capability, to build up the adaptability to be able to support that growth when it happens. Now, there are a few people who may be very lucky. They may be at an organization where, in fact, sales are surging, demand is through the roof. Guess what? At that point in time, growth operations is also important because you still are dealing with a situation where things may change very rapidly. And in fact, you may deal with a situation where in 2021, the factors that cause this current demand surge subside and there may be other changes or even a reverse in the demand. And that's where that building up of an adaptable infrastructure, a flexible infrastructure that you can quickly scale up, scale down, pivot left, pivot right is going to be so important.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Chris. We're going to go ahead and do kind of our final wrap up here. Absolutely fantastic. The insights there are just terrific. And again, buy the book. If you want to hear some more about that, I cannot wait to rip open that copy. I admittedly haven't done that yet, so on my read list. So we wanted to tell our sponsors a huge thank you. We've got Bombora, Integrate, and Leadspace. We also would like you to consider joining our community. We just started a Slack community, the Growth Ops community, and we will be sending everybody an invite. Chi-Chi, who is on our board, just put the Slack channel link invite in the chat for everybody. So we look forward to seeing you there. We also are have a new website unveiled. So as we've switched over from the Mocha brand, we have the growthopscommunity.org. We are on Twitter at growthops.com. And then we also are looking for volunteers. Since we're a new community, we do have people who have been on with Mocha, but there is a lot more that we want to do. And we're really looking forward to lots of great engagement and being a hub to the spokes. So we'll be doing some stuff coming up with partnering with other Slack communities. So as an example, the Marketing Ops community, there's one that is run by a guy named Mike Rizzo, fantastic. And we're going to be hooking our communities together so that when you're thinking of growth operations, you're thinking of the 60,000-foot view, that you want to dive deeper into those areas in marketing operations, then you can head on over there and come back to the conversations in different ways across different channels of, sales and marketing and customer success, product, and partners. So aside from that, we just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody for participating today, and that we look forward to engaging with you all in meaningful growth operations conversations. Thank you, and grow on.